there's a fire in Pudding Lane.
A fire in the poorest quarter of the city on the hottest night of the year. Chaos, panic, confusion. What better time to strike against the king?
Well, I mean, basically, Acos Films came to me a while ago, a year and a half ago, whenever it was, feels like about 25 years ago, but a while ago, and said, you know, what did I think about the idea of writing a drama on the Great Fire? And I said, well, that must have been done before. And so I went and Googled it, and it hadn't been done before. I think once we did it, we worked out why it hadn't been done before, because you can't do fire very well on CGI, certainly not close up. So they had to kind of build an enormous set and burn large parts of it. I think it was all pretty stressful, thankfully. I wasn't sort of having to take responsibility for the stressful bits, but even writing it, you know, you write some scene and they go, well, that's really great, but it's going to cost about 20 million quid. So can we kind of rethink that in a way that we might actually be able to shoot it? So I just thought it was the one British kind of event in history that, you know, everyone knows about, but no one really knows that much about. I thought it was, the more I researched it, it was a really fascinating period in history. It was an extraordinarily dramatic event, which obviously when you're writing dramas, you're interested in. I suppose in one sense, the things that surprised me a little bit were the things that clearly had some relevance to today. So in one sense, you know, looking at two royal brothers who had this extraordinary bond that they'd been given by their historical circumstances, really, not just the fact that one was king and one was his brother, but the fact they'd, you know, suffered tragedy at a young age, in their case their father having his head chopped off. That was interesting, the way in which, you know, you could almost substitute fear of the Catholic minority then with kind of, you might say the same about, you know, fear of Muslim extremism now. And even actually down to, yes, we had a kind of more or less absolute monarchy still at the time, but the levels, the complications of decision making, the temptation sometimes to take a pragmatic decision rather than a principled decision, it was all there. So, I mean, I'm a history student, so in one sense it didn't surprise me, but actually just going and looking at how a crisis unfolding it, comparing it with the London riots and so on, I was really interested by the various parallels of how people behaved at a time of crisis. I hope people will watch it because hopefully it's a good drama. It's always a good place to start. But I think, you know, the obvious resonance is, I hope will make it interesting. I mean, when I watched it back, I kind of noticed that an awful lot of what I'd written has been informed by one experience or another. You know, even down to the sort of Sir Humphreys at court, busy trying to tell the king that, you know, it's a time of austerity, we can't possibly afford this, Your Majesty. And he says, well, just do it. And then they kind of have to decide whether they're actually going to do it, or whether he means it, whether he thinks he means it, or whether they're just going to try and subvert him like they normally do.
The king only cares for his pleasure.
And the truth is, everyone else indulges me, so I indulge myself.
If this fire destroys London, it'll be the end of my reign and doubtless my life. And you think I have any less to lose than you? Someone must pay for the pain and injury and torment that has been caused, and they shall.
It's the baker from Pudding Lane. It's the man who started it.
Well, I suppose you have to. I mean, when I did the research for this series, there are some characters who obviously present themselves. The king is a fascinating. I mean, I think King Charles II is one of our most interesting characters. Pepys, obviously, we know a lot about him from his diary, and there was a brilliant biography of him written by Claire Tomlin a while ago. So those are quite well-known characters in English history, you know, and so you kind of have to include them. But I wanted a sort of every man at the heart of the story, and that had to be the baker, obviously, because it started. And then you think, well, you know, I mean, in real life, I don't think he was in love with his brother's wife, so the bits I invented. But, you know, I thought it was interesting to make him the heart of the story. It seems in all likelihood that the fire was just a tragic accident, and you know, it's quite something to carry the idea that you burned your whole city to the ground by your carelessness or whatever it was. So he just seemed to me an interesting character, and he's brilliantly played by Andy Buck, and I always think that doing the everyman, family man hero is actually a very difficult role to pull off. You know, it was kind of like what Harrison Ford and Tom Hanks and people to some degree made their careers on. There actually aren't that many actors who can, you know, who can pull off being decent and, you know, heroic, but interesting and slightly complex at the same time. So I think Andy Bucknell will go on to be one of our most successful actors, and I think hopefully this is he's already done lots of great stuff. I think this was an interesting point along the way for him because I think he's particularly good in it.